You're listening to Walk It Out with Tricia Goyer, where we discover what it looks like to follow God and be swept away on the journey of a lifetime. Author of over 70 books, mom of 10, yes, 10, homeschooler and speaker, Tricia Goyer will explore what radical obedience to God's word looks like. It's time to hear from God lovers who've dared to say yes. Listen in to heart chats and learn how others overcame doubts and fears. Discover how God used ordinary people to impact others one step at a time. If you're ready to get radical, get going, and make a difference in this world, you're at the right place. Here's your host, prolific writer, world traveler, people lover, and mega nap taker, Tricia Goyer.
I am so excited about this week's podcast. We're going to be talking about the book, The 6 Needs of Every Child. So let me introduce my guest. Amy Olrick is an author and a techie who has spent her professional life working with organizations to build social movements grounded in the ethic of love. Her work and writing have been featured in The Guardian and USA Today. She lives in New Zealand with her husband and their 3 children. Dr. Jeff Olrick is a clinical psychologist who specializes in working with children and families. Dr. Olrick has over 20 years of experience working in a variety of settings, including the University of Virginia, residential treatment, the public school system, community mental health, and private practice. He lives in New Zealand with his wife and 3 children. So welcome, Amy and Jeffrey.
Oh, thank you so much. We're really happy to be here with you.
It's so good to be here.
I am so excited about this book. And as my listeners know, we have 10 kids. 3 of them are adults. Those are our biological ones. And then we've adopted 7. 2 are out of the house right now. We have 5 still at home. And I am dealing with all the things that came with them not getting the connection they needed, not getting their needs met as children. Yeah. So I was so excited about this book. So I would just love to hear where it got started. I think, Jeffrey, you'd be the first one to talk about where you first learned just about this need for connection and what you saw when you were dealing with families.
Yeah. That story is an interesting one, and it really intersects with my faith story as well. I came to faith in Christ just before I went away to graduate school, and I had already wanted to pursue a doctorate in child development and specifically studying child attachment, and that really interested me. From when I was at the University of Miami. But at the same time, I was beginning to explore that more in depth in graduate school. I was introduced to the Bible and Scripture, and I loved coming to know with fresh eyes sort of who God is and how to make sense of our humanity from a faith perspective. So I sort of had this real intense dual track going on in my life at that point, which was to really dig deep into what it means to be human in terms of child attachment, and also looking at Scripture with those same eyes. And the fact is that attachment science has so much to say that really affirms what I've come to believe as a Christian through the lens of the gospel about what it means to be human. So that was really the impetus, just a hunger to get that information out to people, because I think it's exciting for parents generally, but especially parents of faith. So, yeah, that's where my journey began.
Yeah. And then I know, Amy, as you know, you've explored this too. There's an opening story in the book about being at a pool and just seeing that the mom just needed to connect with her kids, and he just wanted that connection. And I think so many times as parents, we just think, oh, our kids are being whiny, or, you know, they're really not hurt. And really, I mean, we're able to see when we're able to look through the lens of connections and meeting our kids' needs, that there's often a lot more going on than our kids just being disobedient or whiny.
Right. It was so fascinating. So Jeffrey and I started dating when he was in graduate school and I was an undergrad. So he would just be talking about all these things with me. And I was so fascinated in the science that he was unpacking, which is that all of us humans have these 2 equal complementary instincts that are very difficult sometimes for us parents to understand. One is to go out and explore the world, just to go out and master it and make it our own. And then the other one is to come back and to find refuge in our caregiver, to like when things get hard, to come back and become restored. And so, but it's hard for us as parents to see that, because they can feel so like they kind of cancel each other out sometimes. It's hard for us to see that. So what we did was we broke each of the instincts to go out and to come back into 3 different needs. And I think what that story at the pool was talking about was, as we had spent so much time identifying and looking at these things, it just becomes so easy to recognize, oh, he's hurt. He's crying at the pool. He needs to come back. He just needs a little bit of comfort. He needs a hug, and then he'll be ready to go out into the world again. But you have to kind of have eyes to see it first. So that's why the needs are exciting to me, because they've helped me so much as a mom to just see what my kids are needing.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the compass of needs. I have so many underlines and stars and things in this book. So go ahead and just explain it, and then we'll dig more into it.
Great.
Yeah, sure. So, as Amy mentioned, so there's 6 needs, and 3 of them relate to this whole idea that when we feel safe, when things are good in our soul, what we're made for is to move out into the world and discover it, explore it, master it. And we do that still in relationship, even though we're going out, like especially young children, but not just young children. We do that with a look over our shoulder. And there's so much that young children don't know and don't understand. They need us to help them make sense of the world. So those 3 needs and that movement of human nature and intimate relationship is first delight, then support, and then boundaries. So delight really is about needing to be seen and affirmed with joy apart from our work. So, so often we focus on what our kids are doing. Are they doing it right? Are they doing it well? And we are attuned to, are we proud of them in a sense, right? Or we're pleased with what they are doing. But delight is much different than that. Delight is this inherent joy in them as humans in their own right, regardless of what they're doing in particular. I think about when our firstborn, Josh, came into the world and being like, oh my gosh, here is this person. I've been waiting for you for 9 months. I'm just amazed. And we have moments of that in our life, but they can pass us pretty quickly in the busyness of life. But it's really important to stop. Really, the key aspects of delight are being able to pay attention, to stop, to not be busy, and to see our children as themselves. So that's delight, and we call that the wind in their sails. When it feels like somebody sees you and is tickled by you and is for you, that really propels us into the world. Support.
I love that. Okay, before we go on, this is just like clicking in my head so much. So when one of our kids, we adopted him, he was 2.5, and he was considered RAD, reactive attachment disorder. So he wouldn't make eye contact. He would just take off with whoever. There was no connection there. And so we go to therapy with this little guy, and she's like, this is what I need you to do. And we practiced this for 6 months in the therapy office. And I'm like, really? This is what is going to solve our problem? But we would, she said, every day you need to spend 5 to 10 minutes with him, and he needs to be feel seen, feel heard, and feel appreciated. So you're going to sit there and you're going to say, you're holding the red truck. You are driving the blue truck on the floor. Yeah. And then you repeat what he says. So if he'd say, he's 2.5. So he'd say car, I'd say car. So I repeated what he said. So I noted what he was saying, what he was doing. I repeated what he said. And then I would say, like, if he'd hand me a car, thank you for sharing. Great job sharing. And so I'm like, this is exactly what delight is, which obviously he hadn't gotten that in the 2.5 prior years. And now this is the kid that like every day he wants to snuggle with me. We read stories. And so it's just like that time of him feeling seen, heard, and appreciated, which you're summing up as delight. And I talk to parents all the time. I'm like, if their kids are, having really bad anger problems or they're really struggling with discipline, I'm like, go spend some time with your child, like do this activity. And now I'm like, okay, this makes so much sense. This is delight.
It's beautiful.
And it's so cool to hear that story, because what we have identified delight as is a mirroring need. So it's a need, exactly what you're talking about, for us to be seen. And on the compass there, these 3 needs to go out. Delight is the one on the exploration side of the compass, to be seen. And then there's a matching one on the other side. But it's so foundational to our development to be seen. And I remember when one of our little guys was struggling, just going back to the materials and saying, all right, they just need their little love banks filled up. It's not, this is not a discipline issue. This is not anything else. They just need to be seen and loved by us for a while.
Yes.
Oh, that's great. Okay, let's talk about support.
Yeah, so support is really just the need that we have to be nurtured in our natural interests, abilities, and help with developing the skills that we need in life to thrive. So, we open up worlds for our kids, and we help them to master them. They're not just going to master the world all alone. So that covers a lot of ground. But boundaries is a real companion to it, because as our kids move out into the world, they're not the only ones in the world, and actions have consequences. And so we also have to show them that there are limits to their exploration, that there are others in the world, and help them understand how to fit into the world of others. With little kids, it's the physical world, like don't run out into the street. But over time, it's especially important in terms of relationships, that, hey, look, when you just leave your dishes lying around, that has consequences for me. Like there's no fairies that come along and clean up the kitchen, right? That affects me. That's something that your action has consequences for. So I can lovingly point that out to you and say, hey, bud, so come and help me and get this kitchen cleaned up with me. So boundaries is about helping them understand that they're not alone in the world.
I love that. Yeah. Okay, now let's talk about the next 3, protection, comfort, and equipping.
So life isn't all exploration and discovery. Sometimes life is hard. It can be scary for little kids, or it can be stressful in other ways. And so when we are distressed, we are made from the get-go to cry out. And when we can move toward our caregivers, and we serve the role first to protect, which is the first need on that side. So when there's real imminent danger, and we're little, we need somebody bigger, wiser, and stronger come along and physically, literally protect us. But beyond that initial danger, we need somebody to comfort us. That distress we carry within us, that fear or frustration or uncertainty, we feel it inside of us, and it unravels us in a way. And so comfort is the need to be seen and just held in that distress and that suffering, whatever form it takes. And that's an important first step toward the last need on that side of coming toward our caregivers, which is equipping. And equipping moves from I'm holding you, I'm seeing that you're scared or you're upset, and I'm going to sit here and name that for you, help you name that, but also move you toward some solution, some movement, some plan. How do we get from distress to getting back on the field, as I say? And so equipping is about that discovery of, okay, what happened was that dog barked really loud, and you were scared and you didn't know if he was friendly or not. And here, let me help you see that dog is friendly. Let me go over there with you. So it's developing a plan. So those three are protection, comfort, and equipping. And when we move through those stages, then a kid naturally says, great, thanks. I'm going back out on the field again. I'm going to go discover and play.
Yeah. And I just love that you lay it out so easily for us to see. And I think, I think a lot of us do these things naturally, but it might just help to see, oh, okay, I'm really not doing a good job with this area, or maybe I can do this more. And even with our own kids, one of our other kids, we got her when she was 5, and every time she got hurt, so skinned knee, bumped her head, she would get angry. She would throw things, she would pound the wall. And so we talked to the therapist about that, and they said, you don't know what happened when she got hurt before. Maybe someone made fun of her. Maybe someone spanked her because she was annoying them. And so we actually had to teach her to come to us when she was hurt, and that we would hold her and comfort her. And it was so funny because, I taught this like, okay, come to mama. You got an owie. And we would practice when she wasn't hurt, but, we pretend you have an owie. Come to mommy. I'll hold you. We'll put a Band-Aid. And so we did this for weeks and weeks. And then one day she was out with my husband and was teaching her how to ride her bike, and she fell and skinned her knee, and he went to reach for her, and she turned to the house and ran to the house and said, Mommy, because I had taught her to come to mommy. We hadn't thought of, we need a teacher. She can go to daddy too. But I think so many times we don't, we think, this child has a problem, an anger problem. No, really, she just needed to be taught that we can be there for comfort. And I think when we can see these things, we might be able to see areas that we haven't done a good job, or maybe we can do better on how we can really help our kids.
And I think that I love that story so much. The work that's done and the conscious work that you've put in is so beautiful. That's a story that I just want to sit with and contemplate that you have poured into your daughter for a minute. It really is beautiful. One of the things that it made me think about is one of the reasons why we put this into a compass is because we want people to be able to look at all the needs together and recognize that, okay, these are human needs. So these are needs that I also had when I was a child, and just start to wonder about the needs that were met most frequently in our own lives growing up, and maybe some needs that were overlooked or undervalued, because those are the needs that tend to be the ones that we go to. The ones that were met really strongly in us are needs that we then try to naturally meet really, or have the potential to overdo in our own kids. And so on the compass itself, we have this needle, and it can be split in half of where our child is pointing and we are pointing. Let me see if I can explain it well, because it really makes a difference for me to understand. So let's say we have a child, we do actually have one of our kids, he gets hurt a lot, and he just really, really feels his pain and he has a tendency to really express his hurt. And I grew up in a home where boundaries was really heavily valued, and comfort is a harder need for me to meet. It just doesn't come naturally to me. So when he's falling and hurting, his little compass dial is pointed to comfort. That's what his need is. Mine is pointed to boundaries, because sometimes I just want the screaming to stop. Right. So understanding this need and being able to picture this compass in my mind and understanding the value. And that's what the science and stories we hope to share in the book is about, understanding the value of comfort and actually how it helps move our kids forward is what gives me the ability to sit down on the floor with them and say, hey, bud, let me just hold you for a minute. We'll get through this. And that's so fascinating. It's what builds his strength and resilience over time. But it takes me recognizing, this is something that I don't know how to do well. Let me learn it and come alongside my kid.
Yeah, I love that, because you're talking about, okay, I see this is a need, but why do I feel uncomfortable? And you talk about that, pay attention to what's happening and then what makes you uncomfortable about it. And it made me think about, we adopted all these kids, and the noise, you think I'd be like, that there's going to be a lot of noise around here. But even like if they're all loud laughing, I would just be so tense. And I started thinking about like, what is going on? Well, I grew up with my mom and my stepdad, and he was a Vietnam vet, and we had to very much be quiet around him. It was, the house is quiet. We're not going to disturb him. He's watching his sports. And it wasn't like this verbal thing they told us. It was just, if you got his attention, you usually got in trouble. So things were just like calm and quiet. And it just made me realize like the noise, even if it was joyful noise, playing around, it would just make me tense. And I really had to tell myself like, no, it's okay. They're having fun. They can be loud. This is our house. And it like going through those things in my mind. But I love that how sometimes the things that our kids need, we are uncomfortable, and it doesn't seem like, that this is the right way we should be acting or reacting to our kids, but really it's okay. We just have to see, why are we uncomfortable?
Yeah. Right. It's like, if you think about these needs, like being born with these needs, it's like we're born with really the impulse to move in every direction. Like the whole world is open to us. And sometimes we're going to move left. Sometimes we want to move right along the points of a compass. But what you pointed out, and Amy has pointed out, is like our early histories basically teach us there are points on the compass we do not go. We move in this direction. Boundaries and quiet, and where your place is, and you don't move out of that place. So when suddenly my kid comes along, like, I want to go over here. I want to go in the direction of comfort. You're like, oh no, that we don't go in that part of the world. But this is an opportunity for our own healing. I think that God invites us into His work in our lives through our children. In this way, if we allow it, if we think, hey, God is present in this relationship, not just for my kid, but for me. So, hey, what's going on in both of us? So that you have learned to ask that question is really will be a blessing not only for your kids, but for yourself. And I hope the book helps. It serves that tool for people. It's like not just I want something for my kid, but I want something for myself in terms of thriving.
Right. I love that. And I love, so it talks about, the subtitle is Empowering Parents and Kids Through the Science of Connection. And I think that's what this whole thing is. The needle is to show us the areas where we need to connect. And, I homeschool my kids. So as a homeschooling mom, we end up getting kids that were older. Our oldest one was 15 when the adoption was finalized, all the way down to 3 when the adoption was finalized. And so here I have all these different ages and all these different stages and all these different issues. And as a homeschool mom, I just felt like, you know what? I just need to read out loud to these kids. We could worry about all the workbooks, and yes, we're still going to get to the math, but I spend, a couple hours every morning, and we read Bible stories, we read missionary stories together. We meet, read all these things, because I just had this feeling like they need to hear my voice. They need to have this time of connection. And really, I've seen the homeschooling, the learning get easier. And it's come from us just sitting around the table reading books. And I think so many times we try too hard to like figure out all the stuff we have to do, when really our kids just want us to connect.
Yeah. And here's the thing that we both, Amy and I, paid attention to as we're raising our kids, and we're on year 16, 17 of that. But the world, and I think this happened, like the world, even in our churches as well as non-church environments, the world in general really focuses on outcomes. My kid's learning, how is he behaving? So there's, and that pressure feeds on our fears that we want to do it right. We want our children to turn out well. How are other people going to judge me? How are things going to turn out for my kid? How is God going to judge me? And that feeds us, that prompts us, that pushes us in that direction of outcomes. What do I need to get, what can I do to get the outcome that I think is the right one, however you want to define that. And what you're pointing out there is actually connection is the safest route to these outcomes that we probably care about most in the depths of our soul. which we might even describe as the fruit of the Spirit: gentleness, kindness, self-control. These things that are the real markers later in life for human thriving. We get there through just what you described, connecting with our kids. And then we fill in those gaps along the way. We have the conversations. I teach you things, but it's not a straight line. And the world sort of is pressuring us, these sort of straight lines. Is my kid where he needs to be at this moment in time? What will other people think? And we want to invite people out of that pressure and reconnect with the idea of you are on a lifelong journey with your children. Each one of them is their own person, and your relationship with each of them is its own relationship. And connect, and you'll get where you need to go.
Yeah, I love that so much. It helps me now that I have adult kids. My older kids are 31, 28, and 26. My daughter's a missionary in the Czech Republic. We talk every day. We video call every day. My two sons live in town, and they come over and we play board games. And there's a lot of things especially as a homeschooling mom, I didn't get right. All of them were horrible in math by the time they got to college because I'm more language and we'd read stories, and they all had to take, basic level math. But they all have done fine. They, two are college graduates. One is a junior in college. They're doing fine. And one of them, that's a junior in college, he just aced his calculus test. I'm like, see, he's like, but he's like, Mom, I know, you didn't get it perfect, but he got there. And I think the fact that we have the relationship, the connection, my adult sons still come over and we play board games and we have meals, that looking back, those times that we read stories and played games, that has really just solidified our relationship as the years have gone by. And so it just encourages me with my younger kids, if they're struggling, yes, we will get to those math facts, but let's spend this time together, and all those other things will be taken care of in time.
It sounds so simple, but we really just want to help people change, stop themselves in their mind from asking the question that I think so many parents go to, and I certainly do, is what do I do with my child? And changing that question, transforming it into how shall I be with this person, right? Because that little person that you were working on with math facts is now a 31-year-old man who comes over to your house and plays board games. And I might have your order of your kids wrong, but it's just,
you're right.
It's hard for us to see that in the moment, right? But it's this long view vision, and it's how shall I be? Because this is a person who is developing and growing in the world. And all these things, we're going to have hard moments, hard months, sometimes hard years with our kids. And that doesn't tell the full story. Just like our own personal hard moments, hard months, hard years don't tell the whole story of our lives, right? But it's just so hard to not get caught up in whether we feel like we're doing something wrong. So
yeah, I love that. Okay, there's one more thing I want to talk about before we end, because I think when I'm speaking at homeschool conferences, when I have parents, especially adoptive parents, coming and talking to me and wanting advice, something that I learned about the thinking brain and the feeling brain has helped me so much. And just, when your kids are angry, or when they're upset, or when they're emotional, where they're worried about a worldwide pandemic, when that emotional brain, feeling brain is turned on, they're not going to be able to have their thinking brain. They're not going to be able to sit there and memorize spelling words, or they're not going to be able to listen to your rational conversation of why this is right and why this is wrong. So I end up, over everything I've learned, I think this has helped me the most. And I would just love for you guys to just explain it, because I think this is so, so important.
Yeah, that's right. It's for me in my training, these things sort of oh yeah, that's how it works. But you realize, we don't walk around thinking about ourselves as having different brains. We just there's my brain, I do what I do. And, this idea that actually we have more than two brains, but let's just start there. This idea that there's a part of our brain, it really is its own ecosystem, if you will, and its job is to really to interact with the world with a sense of urgency, survival, And that emotional part of our brain, which just reacts to the world as it's experienced really on a sensory level. Like, what did I hear? What do I see? What do I smell? Like, before you can even consciously be aware of the information, that part of your brain is doing its thing.
Mm-hmm.
And if what it picks up in the world is like important in some way, and that could be related to, you talk about having children you've adopted, they have a whole life story. And it's mostly parents who adopt. It's like, it's blind to them. They may know some general things, but in the specifics, you're walking blind. And so that part of their brain is carrying those hard, intense experiences. And at any moment, that part of the brain could be on fire, really just saying, hey, you know what? I picked up something. I need to get out of here.
Mm-hmm.
And just as you pointed out, when that part of our brain is in charge, it's like pulls the plug on this other part of our brain, which really works best when we feel safe.
Yeah.
And the coast is clear. And that's when we can be rational and curious and discovering. That's the part of our brain that we really use when we're in that explore mode. And so it's like we're in two different modes. The comfort part, that need, the reason it's so important is it's like a bridge to that rational part of our brain. And we often want to jump over that bridge and get straight to the solution. As parents, we sort of think we see the problem and know what would solve it. But our emotional brains is not jumping over that bridge. If we want a kid to be able to really move out of that mode of distress, we have to come alongside of them and what I call hold space for them, create space of holding for them, and that's really, it can literally be a hold, but a lot of kids, especially from abuse backgrounds, that can be tricky too. Mm-hmm. It's just a pause. It's like, I see it. Something's going on for you. I know your emotional brain, whether I use that language or not, has picked something up, and I'm here with you until we figure this out together. And in general, we find a way, if we do that, that helps our kid across that bridge back into our thinking brain, where we can be curious and say, what's going on here? Let's figure it out together. And that's slower. In a sense, it's slower, but really it's actually the fastest way to get to a true recovery. Sometimes we can shut down the distress really quickly with threats, but it's not actually helping the problem. It's just going to pop right back up sooner, if not later, if not sooner.
Yeah, and I love that, just taking that pause, holding that space, sometimes physically holding them, and really, you train them to see what's really going on. And an example would be one of my kids getting upset with a sibling, and over something, maybe like they're being noisy or something that normally wouldn't bother them. And I'll say, so what do you think's going on? Well, he was being noisy. Well, he's noisy a lot, but usually don't get upset. So, what do you think is happening? And so then when they pause and think about it, I just really did bad on that quiz I took, or the neighbor said something rude, but it's making them aware of what's going on. And I think asking questions is like one of the best things we can do, instead of saying you're really just upset because the neighbor, like that doesn't, then they just get mad because you're calling them out. But what do you think is going on is something that I think really helps a lot.
And here's the tricky part, the really tricky part. When our kids get emotional, or in particular ways based on their own history, we get caught up in our emotional brains, right? Because like you were talking about that in your family, noise, that meant danger, like something bad would happen if people got loud. Well, your emotional brain remembers that. That's where you hold that information. You don't hold it up in your thinking. You're not thinking about it consciously, although now you probably do because you've made that connection.
Right.
And so when we as parents get pulled into our emotional brains, then we get into the mode, I just have to shut this whole operation down. We lose the ability to go slow and be curious. So yeah, that whole two brain business is important for our kids. It's just important for us though, because if we're in the emotional brains, we're not going to be able to do that work of saying, "Hey, buddy, what's really going on here?" Sometimes the best we can do. Amy and I were talking about this recently. Is the handoff. There are times when I know I am not. I can't go in the direction my child needs. I'm tapped out, whether I realize what the reason is or not. And I'm grateful that, Amy having these tools, she can go, I know where we need to go with our son, and I can go there right now because that's not happening for me the way it's happening for you. I'm not stuck in my emotional brain the way you are.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. And I love that. And my husband and I have done that too. I'm getting emotionally charged. And he's like, I'll go take care of it. And sometimes he just goes and sits in the room. Like he doesn't need to have the conversation. He just sits there until the child's ready to have a conversation. But another thing that really helped me is one of the therapists said, she's trying to make you mad so that the pressure's off her, right? Because all of a sudden, if you're angry, then she could say, "Oh, you're mad at me," and it's off her emotions. It's off what she did wrong. Yeah. And so she's like, if you stay calm, you win. And so, I mean, so many times when I feel like, I know it's so true though, but I would just sit there and tell myself, if I stay calm, I win. If I stay in my mind, if I stay calm, I win. And then letting them go, and especially with teenagers, like I just want to go and follow and continue the conversation and get them to see the right way and teach them to be respectful instead of disrespectful. It's like, nope, I'm not going there. I'm going to stay here and finish making dinner, and I'm going to stay calm.
That is really that switch between parenting young kids into tweens and teens. That was so difficult for me because all the things that feel so natural and instinctual to me, which is like to come close and hug and work it out and talk, that doesn't work with our preteens. And I found myself one day something had happened with one of our guys, and I kind of followed him into his room and wanted to talk it out. Like, we're just going to work this out because that feels comfortable to me. I want to connect in that way. And at one point, my poor little guy just put a blanket over his head. And I thought, what am I doing? I mean, he obviously just is in that time where he needs alone space. So again, it's that, all right, thinking back to what are the needs and realize, okay, we still need to connect, but we can't connect the way that I'm comfortable because he's always changing and growing in a relationship, just as all relationships change. So what we ended up doing that day was we both kind of took time away from each other and then just went out and got ice cream and took a walk around the river and didn't even talk about that issue that we were dealing with. But then we could later come back to it. But it was just that whole idea of me just needing to see my kid and recognize, hey, as their brains are developing, their kids. Another thing that I just really hope that people can get from the book is this idea that our kids' brains are growing and developing and changing. And sometimes the things that they do are unfathomable to us just because they're not thinking. They're literally not thinking. So it's about us. We need to go into that place if we can, to just think, what do they need here in a way that I can guide and shepherd them to get through this next developmental stage.
Yeah. And their brains aren't fully developed. I mean, we could logically think through why they don't need to be doing that. And I love how you said, just giving them space and maybe doing something to connect and then bring the conversation up later. And I'll talk to tell parents all the time, you don't have to solve it that day. You don't even have to bring it up that, within 24 hours. Make time, connect later when you're both feeling, the release from whatever was going on and don't feel the tension. You could say, so what was going on the other day? And, we have lots of girls. So we have 7 girls and 3 boys. And so sometimes they'll say, I was just feeling really hormonal. I'm like, that's what I thought, I couldn't have told you in the moment that's what was going on. So, and boys can feel hormonal too at times. But I think so many times, I think we want to solve it. We want to fix it back to, what you were saying earlier. And it's like, no, we don't need to do that in this moment, especially as they get older. And they're even they have no idea sometimes what's going on.
Well, it's taking that long view, right? It's like, it's so difficult for me to make that shift. Seeing from this like in the moment, how are things going, to in the long run, how will things be with this person that I'm in a relationship with?
And it's interesting, that basic descriptor we use for comfort is see and hold, and for your 3-year-old, holding is literally holding. But we hold for our adolescent kids just by I see what see something's going on, or I know you're upset, and I am here. If and when you're ready to talk about that or need me to help you work through that, that's holding. That's a kind of holding. But that shift can catch you by surprise because, in our own eyes, there's still our little guys or little girls, and but it's a journey. We figure it out, and just knowing what the ground is, we have the options we have. Based on our design, just can be it helps me to sort of feel less lost, even if the problem, quote unquote, isn't being solved right this moment.
Oh, that's so good. And for me, the holding, usually with teens, is like 11 p.m. All of a sudden, they'll want to start talking. I'm like, I am so tired right now.
The 1 a.m. knock at the door. And I thank God for the 1 a.m. knock at the door. I mean, some of the most meaningful moments have happened then, but I do have to steel myself to say, okay, this is where we push past the tiredness and really enter in.
Yeah, because then, when they are 26 and they need something, that's when they had that 1 a.m. knock on the door, and they're able to come to you when they're 26 and really struggling with something at school or whatever's going on at work. Or oh, so good. I mean, we could talk all day, but so tell us where listeners can find more information about you and the book.
Oh, thank you. So we are at growingconnected.com. You can find information about the book there. It's called The 6 Needs of Every Child. And then we're on Instagram and Facebook at Growing Connected.
And I'm on Twitter at Jeffrey Olrick.
Thank you. We will put all those in the show notes, but thank you so much for being here. Okay, I could have talked to them for so much longer. I love all the things that they're sharing. And as a mom who has had to get so much training from the experts on how to help kids, I think this is a book that everyone needs to read. And I love what they say. Dr. Jeffrey and Amy, I love what they say in their book. It talks, here's a quote. It says, "Faith teaches that we are made for and formed by relationship. Science powerfully reveals this to be true, and the most foundational of all human relationship is the relationship between parent and child. We are made to connect." And I know for sure that one of the hardest things I've ever faced as a parent, as I mentioned, is attempting to build a bond with kids who fight against that very thing. They want to be loved, but they put up walls because of their past hurts. They want to connect, but every time an adult draws close to them, they feel filled with anxiety and fear. And I think so many times we think we need the right discipline methods, but really what we need is parents who are willing to step forward and connect. And this is true for parents that have kids with big, big struggles, or parents with kids with just everyday struggles that maybe struggle to obey. All kids struggle to obey, but I think so many times we think we need to figure out the right discipline methods when really we just need to pause and really take note of what's going on inside our kids' hearts and minds and emotions. And it makes such a huge difference. So I'm learning to parent in a whole new way because all my old parenting methods didn't apply for kids that just really struggle to connect. And I think the wonderful thing is that the tools in this book are for any parent. And what our kids really need is what they talked about is they need us to do more together, to be together more, to draw close. And that's that is going to change everything. And so I think so many times we hear someone like, oh, okay, that doesn't apply to me, but I guarantee not even in kids, in any relationship, we can just figure out how to be together, how to listen better, how to connect more, and that will change all of our relationships. So the Walk It Out verse for today is Psalm 103:13. And it says, as a father shows compassion to his children, so the Lord shows compassion to those who fear him. And that word fear, I always think like, why do we need to be afraid of God? But no, really, the fear is like fear in knowing that his way is true and being respectful of God's ways and the ways things work. I mean, he created people. He knows the way that we work, that we think. And I love that. As a father shows compassion to his children, the Lord shows compassion to those who fear him. And maybe if you're really struggling to connect with your kids, maybe you need to go back to, okay, am I struggling with connecting with God? And this has been me in the past. If we feel like we're not doing good enough and God is going to judge us and he really is watching us, catch us messing up, then we will have a hard time connecting. So maybe today, just start by knowing how much you care for your kids and then picturing yourself as the child and God really connecting with you. And I know someone like me who wasn't raised with a earthly father who just showed that love and compassion and connection. It's hard sometimes to picture God as that heavenly father, but maybe today you just start there. You just start with turning to God and saying, here I am. You know everything about me. You know every flaw, every struggle, and then just be willing to sit still and let him give peace in your heart that he has compassion for you, that he loves for you, that he cares for you. And I guarantee that step will also help you to be able to connect with other people. And it's not like you could do it once and, okay, everything's great. I could totally feel God's love and I'll never struggle with this again. And that's why I love sitting before God in my quiet time. It's that reminder every day that I'm okay. God loves me just as I am. I'm never going to be perfect. But he has compassion for me. He loves me. And then through that, when I accept that, I'm able to reach out to my kids in new and different ways. So let me just pray for you today. Lord, I am so thankful for Dr. Jeffrey and Amy and the wisdom that they have. I'm thankful that they got up super early in New Zealand so they can share all this with us. And I think so many times we are always focused on the struggles and how we're not doing things right. And I pray that each of us will just be okay with being with people, being with you. And from there, we will find the light and support and boundaries and protection and comfort and equipping. But first, we need to just be. And I pray that we will just walk away from this podcast with that sense in all of our hearts today. I pray that we will all lean on you and know that you have compassion for us and that you will help us have compassion for others. I pray a blessing over Dr. Jeffrey and Amy and all that they're doing. I pray that this book will just get into the hands of people who need it, which is all of us, Lord. I pray a blessing over their family. And in your name we pray. Amen. Well, friend, I am so thankful that you are tuning in to the Walk It Out podcast. Maybe you are new here. Maybe this is the first podcast that you heard, and maybe you know that this was something that maybe that you took away for yourself in your parenting or your friendships or any relationship. This works. And share it with a friend. Let a friend know, like, hey, I kind of know that you're struggling with this. Here's something you need to listen to. But also go to walkitoutpodcast.com. There are so many awesome interviews. And I say that because these are awesome guests. I just love every time when I sneak away to my bedroom, like literally I come in my bedroom. I usually have a dog at my feet. I have a piece of a notebook paper that is taped to my door that says live interview. And for that 30, 45 minutes, however long, I can just really have a great conversation. It's such a blessing to me. And I just hope that these great conversations can be a blessing to you too. So share it with your friends, forward it, point them to the Walk It Out podcast. Let them know that they can listen on iTunes, their favorite podcast app, or they can go to walkitoutpodcast.com. There's over 100 different topics, interviews, people that I've talked to connect with. So if you're new here, explore, have fun with that. If you have been a faithful listener, I actually want you to send me a note. So send a note to hello@trishagoyer.com, because if you have been listening for a while, I just want to hear what you're loving, what you appreciate about it. And maybe, if you have tips for me, or if you have someone that you think, oh my goodness, Trisha needs to interview this person, let me know. Like, I have a hard time, ask my assistant, Kristen, I have a hard time saying no, because I love hearing people's stories. I love hearing what God is doing in their lives. But if you have someone that you think, like Trisha needs to interview this person on Walk It Out podcast, you can nominate your friend, your pastor, whoever. Or if you have a pipe dream of, I would love to have Trisha interview this person. I mean, I don't know if I could reach them. Maybe we'll try, but go ahead and email at hello@trishagoyer.com and let us know, first of all, what you think. If you have any suggestions for improving the podcast, or if you have someone that I should interview, let me know that too. But thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for just being a blessing to me. And I pray that God will give you an amazing day.
Thanks for listening to Walk It Out. Head over to the show notes for this podcast and all past episodes at www.walkitoutpodcast.com. If you love the show, share it with someone you know who can make a radical difference in the world. We love new friends.